Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GST Get You Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which is sold to Salesforce for 1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GST that intellectual capacity is evenly spread, but opportunities are not. With that, today I have an incredible guest at Top Global Startups. I'm bringing together the founders, visionaries, and builders, shaping the future of the world that we live in. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that sits at the intersection of technology, ethics, and humanity itself. Because here's the reality: modern medicine has a blind spot. Despite incredible advances in AI, genomics, and precision healthcare, millions of people around the world remain invisible in the data that drives medical decisions. Entire populations are underrepresented. Entire genetic profiles are missing. And that means treatments, diagnostic, and outcomes are often built on incomplete information. But what if we could change that? What if we could use blockchain and artificial intelligence, not just to innovate, but to level the playing field? My guest today is doing exactly that. Yusuf Henriques is the founder and CEO of IndyGeneUS Biosciences, a former U.S. combat medic turned biotech entrepreneur. He's worked across the FDA, VA, Department of Defense, and HHS, giving him a front row seat to systematic gaps in healthcare. Now he's on a mission to democratize medicine by unlocking the power of diverse genomic data, building one of the largest inclusive biobanks and pioneering new models like DNA tokenization to ensure individuals are not just participants, but stakeholders in the future of healthcare. This is a conversation about equity, innovation, ownership, and the future of medicine itself. With that, I'd like to bring him on board. How you doing, my friend?
Good morning. How are you?
So how do you go from, you went from being a U.S. Army combat medic to a biotech founder? It's incredible. What was it? What moment did you were you on some camp somewhere? Were you in some type of installation? You said, "I have an aha moment. I'm going to go into biotech."
Yeah, I wish I know. So yeah, a little bit of my background was always intrigued in science. Doogie Howser trained me in 1989.
I love that show, by the way. That was one of my favorite shows.
I was, look, I enjoyed watching the young bright kid, run circles around, senior medical doctors. So that's what really started this journey for me. Knew the periodic table since I was 8, 9 years old.
Wow.
Deeply
And
interested.
why was that? Did you wake up one day and say, "Hey, mom, I got something pretty exciting"?
Yeah, I started learning and watching Doogie Howser, started figuring out what the, elements were. But medicine was always fascinating me. Quick, right? Figuring out problems. You don't have a lot of time for
Yeah.
folks dying. And then unfortunately, I had the unfortunate experience of watching my grandmother pass away when I was 5 years old to a heart attack at a company picnic. So that really drove me to say I wanted to do something the next time that occurred. So, a little traumatic at a young age, but my grandmother was, my world. And so, watching her leave this earth and I could do nothing because of, a heart attack really drove home to me about being involved in science and medicine. And so that kind of followed me into school where I, excelled well at science, math, and I ended up joining the military as a combat medic because I tested well in the ASVAB. So when I took the ASVAB test, it scored me high in math, English, and science. And so the military offered me to do combat medic training because of my high background in math and science and English.
Did they put you in college too? Because if you got that kind of
So yeah, I served a couple tours, got injured, and so one of the things with disabled veterans, the military offered to put me in the vocational rehab program, Chapter 31. You hear a lot about Chapter 30. Chapter 31 was for injured veterans like myself that had served in combat arena to offer to go to school. So after my tour was ended, I applied and got into Howard University right here in Washington D.C. because I was here getting medical treatment. And so, yeah, the military and the Department of Veteran Affairs paid for my undergrad degree in biochemistry at Howard University.
That's great. Did you like it?
Yeah, look, I had always, again, watching one channel in Jamaica, watched Doogie Howser, and I always saw Howard
You know,
University.
I love that show. I like that the beginning of the show. If I get that down, I would watch that show. I'd be fixated on that thing.
Listen, I mean, so my mind just kept going. But yeah, heard about how the strength of Howard University being one of the top number one historically black college and university, and happened to didn't know that it was right down the street from the old Walter Reed in Washington D.C. So I was literally 4 miles away from the university of choice, but never knew it was right down the street, given that I was doing my tours and ended up at the Walter Reed for treatment. And so, yes, started my academic career there, excelled, did my degree in 3 years.
Wow,
Clinical.
that's great.
Yeah, I was a little bit of an unconventional student. I was like 23, 24 when I started college as a freshman.
How did you like that?
You know what? It gave focus because I knew what I wanted to do, right? Most students get in there. I'm watching them trying to figure
You're
out.
having a lot of fun though. You got to admit that going into fraternities and doing all the wild stuff.
Yeah, no, look, I was a little bit more older, so I didn't get to have too much fun because then I had 2-year-old twin girls at the time
Wow.
I started college. So I was a parent, like I said, unconventional student, but had a lot of fun, built a lot of relationship and friends at Howard University, and academic wise, it pushed me around the science.
No, that's fantastic. You know, you've worked across agencies like the FDA, the VA, DOD, HHS. What did you see the most that people don't see?
Oh, man, I tell you, I explain to people being an immigrant, I went through multiple phases of healthcare, right? You come here as an immigrant, you have a little bit of good healthcare, right? Joined the military, had some stellar healthcare, got treated, everything was good. And then, worked for the government, got the Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is like a staple in the immigrant community for having that healthcare. But yeah, I just saw my level of health and access increase as I got a little bit more money and I worked for institution. So then I'm thinking, well, what happens to the people that didn't get that opportunity, right? To get health care, to be able to get tested for certain things. So, when I'm at the FDA and I'm starting to review drugs and medical devices, I'm starting to see that same lack of access because on the clinical trial side, there's not a lot of people that get through the final stage for phase 3 clinical trial that look like me, and
Hmm.
women, minority. So I'm like, well, this looks a little lopsided. Why is this like this? And so the biggest explanation was that they're lost to follow up. They don't follow up. They don't, continue the research progress. And so I found that a little challenging because I'm like, well, are these all these same people in the same location,
Yeah.
same geographic location? What's making them so apprehensive, to adhere to the which they said they signed up for, right? So you start saying, well, these are the people that signed up and said, yes, we will do it. There must be some limitations in the reason, but never really got to that until further down in my career. But yeah, I think the number one thing while I was at FDA is the level of yeah, the lack of access, and then two, how we had to provide information to the general public at an eighth to even seventh grade level because of the reading comprehension.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a fifth grade level.
Right.
You know, it's kind of crazy. And you know, when you say medicine has a blind spot, Yusuf, what does that mean in real terms?
Yeah, no, look, as I mentioned to you, I saw a little bit of there working for the agencies, right? I had access to a lot of information. And so I'm like, well, why are we just looking at one subpopulation, right? 88, 90% European descendants, for all drug discovery, all drug trials.
It's insane. I just came back from Africa. Most people don't realize, and I don't know why the U.S. isn't spending more time, but there's 54 countries and 1.2 billion people on the continent, the largest population under 30 in the world. In fact, the population of Africa will be bigger than the combined populations of India and China in the not too distant future. And it's crazy we don't. My grandparents, my grandmother immigrated from Africa herself, from the continent, and at 10 years old, and spoke Arabic, and had to scrape along and build some businesses with my grandfather. But you go down through, and we have these underrepresented. I mean, it's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. We're going to be out of the game.
Yeah, no, look, and so it was like, well, what can we do about this? Well, unfortunately, the regulations were set to where it's just a randomized clinical trial. So as long as the pharma companies were able to show that they put out a request for clinical trial, those that wanted to join did informed consent. But I did a little deeper dive as I started to get into more, outside clinical trial research, and started to realize that there are limitations, right? The individuals that signed up didn't realize that it takes two buses and a train, which is what people normally use to get to these trials. Healthcare, right? Childcare, taking off from work. These are some of the underserved populations that are needed in the trial, but none of those things are adjusted for to make sure that those individuals can attend and continue adhere to the trial requirements and protocol. And so what ended up happening, I'm reviewing drug applications and device application that had no minorities in them. And it's because the system was not set up to foster the recruitment. And then of course, there's been some exploitation within the Black and brown community, like Henrietta Lacks, Tuskegee syphilis trial, which has also created some apprehension with Black and brown folks joining clinical trial. But I think overall that was the least of what I started to see. It was that it was just unbearable and not feasible for individuals to go across town to where these clinical trial sites were at predominantly white institution that
Well, I
had.
mean, the other thing is we didn't sell them on why they should do it either. You know what I mean?
Right. So
That education is really important.
big deal.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. So I agree with you 100%. How big is the problem of underrepresentation in genomic data today?
Man, I tell you, I'm sitting in my living room in COVID, and they start to do the vaccine trials, and again, it popped its rear head up, right? Unable to recruit more women and minorities in the trial because there's a system that has been over decades and decades not set up to recruit those population. So I'll tell you right now, the device and drug area, it's all predominantly European descent. We have a unique opportunity because genome sequencing only been around since 2003, as you know.
Mhm.
But again, only one European white male was sequenced at the time. I don't know what the thought process was in there, but I could have guessed that there were no women in the room to say that we should have a female, at least a male and a female. So give you a scope. About 70 million people did the consumer genetics. That's the 23andMe. That's like 0.1% of your genetic material. And so a whole genome sequence in less than 1% of the entire globe have had their whole genome sequence. But 23andMe data, that didn't give you any clinical utility. So you weren't able to look at your predisposition because it was so little amount of genes. And so right now we're less than 1% of the whole world have had their whole genome. But to your point, Africa has the most genetic diversity. And so, as you can imagine, we're missing out on about 40 to 50% genetic variability compared to our European descent counterparts.
It's great. It doesn't make sense. And, but then how does the lack of diversity in data actually impact patient outcomes?
So look, it's pretty. 1 + 1 is 2, right? If you think about it, we go into these trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You're only able to see what the side effects are based on the group that you're running your pilot and your clinical trials on. So what then happens is this drug or medical device gets approved, and it's never really been tested real world on certain communities, so you get that information on the back end, but that's where the trouble lies for patients that have never been through the trial. So then you start to experience some of those side effects and some of those complications that if that diverse population was included in the phase 1, phase 2, the pharma companies would have been able to adjust for those and have good information and material to share with the patient that these are the things that can be happen if you take this medication. What happens is it gets done post-market, which doesn't help that individual because they may have been on medication that has no effect to them because they don't metabolize it, or it just does not work effectively in their genetic with their genetic profile being from underrepresented communities.
Well, how does this affect populations in Africa and the global South specifically?
Yeah, good question. So that was one of my fundamental things when I said, okay, I'll start the second company. My first company was a blood test for PTSD, working with the military, as you can imagine, with suicide rate high, and I lost a couple of friends to suicide. The key thing was to start saying, well, look, where's the genetic variability? We have all of this European descent data already. What's being done to go find additional data set? And of course, I realized that less than 2% of the African diaspora were included in genome sequencing studies. And it's like, again, how could this be when we know life started in Africa, one, and then two, it had a 40 to 50% genetic variability increase compared to European
Or
descent.
maybe the thing is, they're thinking to themselves, listen, life started in Africa, so we're all African anyhow. What's the difference? Like the Dumb and Dumber approach to it.
Look, and so, I started doing research and I'm seeing these small studies, right? 400 people yielding so much genetic variability because of the whole genome sequence, all 3 billion genes. And so I'm like, well, I can't be the only smart one in the room. I'm sure this is on someone else's radar. But yeah, up to this date, there has been very limited effort, intentional, around recruiting more diverse population to see what that happens when you add it. So give you an example, the largest repository of genome sequence data is the UK Biobank. 500,000 samples. But that's why I started Indigenous Bio, because I knew the infrastructure and where the recruitment's being done was going to yield 88 to 90% European white males, and European descendant. And so last year when that study unveiled, guess what? 440,000 out of the 500,000 samples were from European descent. Only 10,000 Asians, 10,000 African descent, and the rest was a mixed bag. So that's what our cell and gene therapy and all of this precision medicine is currently using right now, is the UK Biobanks data, because it's the most well-studied and researched and aggregated data set from cell for whole genome sequencing, but it's still leaving out, 80% of the globe.
No, and it's important that we get this genomic data from African population. It's really critical to the future of medicine. Is this just a data problem, Yusuf, or is it also a trust problem?
So look, as I mentioned to you before, I think we're past the point of, is it a trust problem? I think what we have is community wants to see individuals from their community doing these research and studies. So I think it's more of a logistics and being able to do this at the community level. I think communities that has been left out want to be able to do their own studies without their own communities, right? Whether it's the faith-based, whether it's communities or underserved individual. So I think they now have this resource and the skill set, right? The talent to do this. It's the infrastructure. So that, I think, it's more of an infrastructure issue, and being able to conduct these research ethically in communities that have been long said didn't have the infrastructure to do it. So whether it's our HBCU College of Medicine that has not done these at scale, or we're talking about our FQHCs, which are family quality health centers, again, community driven with Black physicians and doctors that could then drive the uptick of explaining, like you said, education to the community, and then also then getting
It's critically important, and the community's got to want to listen too, right? We got that thing, you know what I mean? Because they're thinking, why do I got to waste my time in this bullshit?
Right.
They gotta, we got to create some. I agree with you 100%, and we got to get it out, and it's going to happen, And if we don't focus, I was in Nigeria. I was with some of the wealthiest families in Africa actually recently.
Right.
And I spoke in front of about 5,000 of them. We were talking about, the thing is, this is the future, right? The future, there's a billion people, 1.2 billion people and growing.
Right. Yeah. So look,
it's crazy. It's insane. And, at the same time, it gets me too, right? We talk about, all these places where we are, the Middle East and everything. Well, why aren't we over in Africa? There were a lot of Chinese there when I was there.
Yeah, no, listen, some folks have figured it out, and as you can see, the
Yeah, and
Chinese
they're really doing a great job, and the
are
thing
doing a
is,
good
where
job,
where's
and but to your
America?
point, they're building the trust, right? They're building
Yes.
trust with the 54 countries, and so that's what I've been shouting from the rooftop. I started the company because we started to see that this is an area. The genomic data has not been monopolized, if you want to think about it, by the pharma companies, right? And there is a unique intentionality and opportunity for us to not make it look like the device data set and the drug discovery data set, because those are too far down the road. The denominators are too big. This is why I focused on genomic data and making sure that we now have 500,000 samples with 440,000. That's what indigenous is trying to do. We're trying to bring that 440,000 from all parts of the other, right? The other 88% that's missing, right? The Asian, Indian, that's what we want to bring to the table.
Well, I
And
mean,
then
we better, because that's where the growth is, right?
that's where the growth is. So
Well,
it's
Africa is really where the growth is. I mean, come on.
right.
I mean, and that's like the most underserved. It's like it's
Most
insane.
underserved, most genetically. So think
And
about
the
it.
most
So,
growth. When you talk about opportunities for growth, I was with one of the founders of M-Pesa
yeah,
over there, which is the banking the unbanked,
yeah.
and it's just unbelievable. These companies are growing, being billion, Flutterwave, those kind of companies are just growing it at a speed you can't imagine, and it's just like, this is not rocket science. Go down there. There's a huge population. The more data we have, the better medicine we can have in a hyper personalized approach. That's what's going to happen too. And because what you're doing is building a hyper personalized approach to medicine, so you know the damn stuff works, so it doesn't kill you.
Listen, I mean, again, you and I are two, again, intelligent individual. There's a whole industry that seems to not have the same viewpoint.
But we got to get it out. I can tell you one thing, Yusuf. I'm out there speaking a lot because of my own background and my own. I'm the experiment. And so I'm doing 7 full body stem cells, which I've had 50 million stem cells from an umbilical cord, and I've
Wow.
already done 150 million. And my biological age went down. I had stage 3 kidney disease. I've had a lot of challenges myself, but they were gone. They went, my stage 3 kidney disease within 2 weeks was gone.
Wow.
And so,
Yeah, no, so that's what we're doing. Look, I in 2022, I flew because of my FDA background. I knew where there were a couple of trusted clinical research organization, one in particular in South Africa. We've built a strong relationship with them. We built a 3 million biobank in South Africa. We now have half of the PEPFAR samples, which this administration wanted to terminate. We were able to get those stored there. And so we're looking to raise the capital now into being able to sequence on continent. So that's the last piece of our business model, which is a little different. We're looking to build the infrastructure there, use the gifted and talented smart scientists that are on the ground, create the infrastructure. We're building a genomic sequencing lab there in South Africa so we could start sequencing over 500,000 samples, which I already have access to. And just so you know, I went to Nigeria in November, just like you mentioned. And in about 3 weeks, I'm heading there to sign an MOU with the National Ministry for Biotech and Research Development Agency for a recruitment of 500,000 sample, which will use our blockchain platform that we've partnered with Oracle, so that we could keep those samples safe and secured on continent, and use a federated data model in order to do that query to look for those new growth around novel gene targets that will be able to get us to precision medicine. That's the only way it's going to be done.
no, I agree with you. And, I was over there with some of the wealthiest folks in Africa from Nigeria and beyond, the wealthiest
Right.
folks.
Right.
And, they're very, but they don't have it's like having a Ferrari in the garage, Yusuf. The thing is getting the Ferrari out so people understand it. And I was sitting around at a dinner table and at the one of those persons' houses, and we were talking about stem cells. And I got them so excited that one of them wants to go over with me for my next stem cell treatment. And so, they're it's not that they don't want to do something; they just don't know. That's the other thing, is we don't know. It's an infobesity. We don't know.
Don't know. And so going back to the beginning of this conversation, it's like, no, it's not a trust thing. It's just what you just said. we don't have enough folks sitting down and explaining the benefits of what this could do. So I spoke to 200 physicians at the National Medical Association for Black Physicians and Doctors last year. And again, I'm talking about genomics, and a lot of them didn't know because that wasn't part of their experience through medical
That's
school.
it. That's it. I agree with you.
So
And
now I'm speaking more at these things because I made the assumption that because these were Doogie Housers, real Doogie Housers, I thought they knew. But it's back to what we're talking about. These are emerging technologies that unless you were born within or been in med school the last 3-4 years, pharmacogenomics, genomics, that's an emerging technology, just like you just hear about AI. But these are the things that are going to drive AI use, right? We're talking about petabytes and terabytes of data when you can put your clinical data and your genomic data in one repository, which is what Indigenous Bio is doing. Then you'll see the magic of AI, machine learning, but it won't benefit all if it's all from one subpopulation.
no, I
That's
agree.
what
I
Indigenous
agree.
is trying
I
to fix.
agree. I call this, by the way, medical infobesity.
Yes.
And so that's the problem, right? Infobesity. Listen, we're coming up to the top of the show, and we'll have to get you on to my other podcast, Longevity. This is a fascinating topic. But closing thoughts, Yusuf, and how do people get a hold of you?
So yeah, look, if you learn or listen to anything else, look, education is big. If you're out there, you're a physician, clinician, I implore you to look into genomics, pharmacogenomics. This is the future, emerging technologies, but the education part for underserved communities is going to be big. We need more women. We need more veterans. We need more minorities in these trials because we're not going to get to precision medicine by 2035 by doing the same thing that we've done before, which is randomized trials. We have to be intentional. And so, if government officials and others, pharma companies are listening, Indigenous Bio is here to help. We have now have access to over 1 million samples on the continent, both in Africa, in South Africa and Nigeria. You could get to me at Indigenous Bio's website. I'm on LinkedIn, Yusuf Henriques, or you could go to our info page at Indigenous Bio. So www.indigenous.bio. But thanks for having me, Gary. I love the fact that you're also deeply embedded this. And so longevity is something that, again, we've seen historically that we have communities that have beat the odds based on their genetic profile.
I mean, I went down through, I created a cancer vaccine for my dog, put her in full remission of stage 4 kidney cancer at a molecular level. I stage 3 kidney disease and sciatica gone within myself, cognitive functions up. My wife's in complete remission of triple negative breast cancer because I used my AI to be able to help in a very profound way. So these are just some things that are going to change our lives. And you're right at the forefront of it. Listen, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. If you want to stay on for a few minutes after the show, we can talk. It would be great to have an extended conversation with you. And to all my audience out there, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition of GST Presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Thank you.
Thank you.